Jake rents an apartment. Marcus buys a house. They both think they made the smarter choice. They're both wrong, because one of them forgot to count the opportunity cost, and the other forgot to count the freedom. And when you run the actual numbers over 20 years, the answer isn't what either of them expects. Let's keep this fair. Jake and Marcus both have $60,000 saved. They both earn $70,000 a year. Same age, same city, same starting point. The only difference is what they do with that housing decision. Marcus uses the $60,000 as a 20% down payment on a $300,000 home. His 30-year mortgage at 6.5% comes out to about $1,517 a month. Plus property tax and insurance push it closer to $1,900. Jake takes the exact same $60,000 and puts it straight into an index fund. He rents a comparable place nearby for $1,700 a month and invests the $200 monthly difference between his rent and Marcus's mortgage payment. On day one, Marcus has keys, a yard, and a story about finally being a homeowner. Jake has a lease and a brokerage statement. Socially, it's not close. Marcus wins every dinner party. His parents are proud. His coworkers ask to see photos of the kitchen. Jake tells people he's renting and investing the difference, and they nod politely, the same way people nod at someone who says they eat plain oatmeal for breakfast. It sounds responsible. It doesn't sound exciting. But feelings and math are two very different things. For the first few years, Marcus is living the dream. He's painting walls he actually owns. He's watching his neighborhood's home values creep up. He's deducting mortgage interest on his taxes. Every payment feels like progress. Jake, meanwhile, is watching a number in an app go up a little, down a little, up a little more. His landlord raises rent by 3% a year. Nobody asks Jake about his portfolio at the barbecue. Let's look at year 3. Marcus has paid roughly $68,400 toward his mortgage, but only about $11,000 of that actually went toward principal. The rest, nearly $57,000, was interest, tax, and insurance. Add closing costs from day one, about $9,000, and Marcus has spent close to $77,000 to gain roughly $20,000 in equity, once you include a modest 3% annual appreciation. Jake, meanwhile, has grown his $60,000 to about $71,000 through market returns, plus his $200 a month difference invested for 3 years adds another $7,700. Total portfolio, around $78,800. Right now, Jake is actually ahead, and almost nobody would guess that from the outside. But Marcus still has one thing Jake doesn't: leverage. His $300,000 asset is appreciating on the full price, not just his $60,000 down payment. That's the single biggest argument for buying, and it's real. If home values in his area climb even modestly, Marcus captures gains on the entire $300,000, not just his slice of it, which is exactly why leveraged assets can outpace unleveraged ones when prices are rising, and can hurt just as badly when they fall. The rent versus buy debate everyone has online focuses on the mortgage payment versus the rent check. What it skips is everything underneath. Maintenance. The rule of thumb is 1 to 2% of home value per year, so $3,000 to $6,000 annually on Marcus's house. Some years, that's a clogged drain. Other years, it's a $9,000 roof he didn't budget for. Property tax and insurance climb most years too, regardless of whether his income does. Closing costs eat 2 to 5% of the purchase price, both when you buy and again when you eventually sell, roughly $15,000 to $20,000 combined on a $300,000 home. And if Marcus needs to move for a job in year 4, he could easily lose money after selling costs, even if the home appreciated. Jake has none of that. If he wants to relocate, he gives 30 days notice and leaves. That flexibility has real financial value that never shows up in a mortgage calculator.
There's also the down payment itself to account for. That $60,000 Marcus put down isn't just a number that disappeared into his house. It's $60,000 that stopped compounding in the market the day he signed. If it had stayed invested alongside Jake's, it alone would be worth roughly $130,000 by year 20 on its own, before a single monthly contribution. That's the real quiet cost of a down payment that almost nobody factors into the renting is throwing money away argument. And because Marcus put down exactly 20%, he avoided private mortgage insurance. But plenty of buyers put down less, pay PMI of $100 to $300 a month on top of everything else, and don't escape it until they've built enough equity to cancel it. That's another cost that quietly erodes the mortgage is basically the same as rent argument people repeat online. By year 7, Marcus's home is worth roughly $370,000. His mortgage balance has dropped to about $258,000, putting his equity near $112,000. Jake's portfolio, growing at a 9% average with his monthly contributions, is sitting around $145,000. Jake is still ahead, and the gap is widening, not because Marcus made a bad decision, but because the math of leverage takes longer to overtake the math of compounding than most people assume, especially with today's higher mortgage rates eating into the early years.
Here's what's happening underneath the surface. Marcus's wealth grows slowly through equity paydown and appreciation, both of which are locked inside an illiquid asset he can't easily touch without selling or borrowing against it. Jake's wealth grows in a curve, boring for years and then accelerating as compounding takes over. By year 10, Marcus's home is worth approximately $403,000. His remaining balance is around $221,000, putting equity near $182,000. Jake's portfolio has grown to roughly $210,000. Jake is still ahead by about $28,000, purely on paper wealth. But this is where the story starts to turn. Marcus's monthly payment has stayed essentially fixed, while rents in Jake's city have climbed. Jake's rent, which started at $1,700, is now closer to $2,280, which means his monthly gap for investing has shrunk to almost nothing. From here forward, Marcus's fixed housing cost becomes his biggest advantage.
Somewhere around year 12, something happens that neither of them fully notices in the moment. Jake's rent finally crosses above what Marcus is paying for his mortgage, taxes, and insurance combined. Marcus didn't do anything to make that happen. He just signed a fixed-rate loan a decade earlier and let inflation do the rest. Jake starts noticing that his extra money to invest each month is shrinking, not growing, because his single biggest expense has no ceiling on it, and his income raises haven't kept pace with rent increases in his city. This is the part of the story that almost never makes it into the online debate, because it doesn't show up until year 10 or later, long after most people have already stopped arguing and just made their decision. By year 20, Marcus's home has appreciated to roughly $540,000. His mortgage is nearly paid off, leaving him with somewhere between $490,000 and $510,000 in equity, and a housing cost that's now dramatically below market rent. Jake's portfolio, boosted early but throttled later by rising rent eating his investable surplus, lands around $480,000 to $500,000. They finish remarkably close, within the same rough range, but they got there completely differently.
Marcus has a paid-off asset and a fixed cost of living for the rest of his life. Jake has full liquidity and never once had to fix a water heater, but he also spent 2 decades watching his housing cost climb every single year, with no ceiling. If I only showed you the case for renting, I'd be doing exactly what real estate influencers do in reverse. Buying has a real, specific advantage renting can't replicate. Once the mortgage is paid, your biggest monthly expense effectively disappears. That's enormous for retirement planning. And in high appreciation markets, leverage can outrun any index fund. Renting has its own hidden risk too. Rent has no ceiling. Unlike a fixed-rate mortgage, there's nothing stopping your landlord from raising your payment every single year for the rest of your life. And that uncertainty compounds against you, exactly when compounding should be working for you. So which one actually wins? It depends entirely on price-to-rent ratio in your specific market. If your local rent is below roughly 0.5% of the home's purchase price monthly, buying usually loses the math badly because you're paying a premium in interest and taxes for an asset that isn't earning its keep relative to renting the same thing. If it's above 0.8%, buying tends to win faster, sometimes dramatically faster, because the wasted rent money would have been higher than the mortgage from day one. It also depends on how long you'll stay. Move before year 5 or 6, and closing costs alone, typically 8 to 10% of the home's value combined between buying and selling, can wipe out any equity gain entirely. Stay 15 years or more, and the fixed payment becomes almost unbeatable because inflation quietly erodes the real cost of a fixed mortgage while rent keeps climbing with it. Interest rates matter enormously too. Marcus locking in at 6.5% tells a very different story than Marcus locking in at 3%, which is exactly why so many people who bought homes in 2020 and 2021 are sitting on a financial advantage that's almost impossible to replicate today, and why some financial advisors are quietly more cautious about recommending buying in the current rate environment than they were 5 years ago.
Jake and Marcus both walked into their 20s thinking they'd made the obviously smart call. Marcus thought buying was always the responsible adult decision, the thing you do once you're a real adult, with your life together. Jake thought renting and investing was clearly the mathematically superior move, the smug, spreadsheet-optimized choice. Neither of them ran their own specific numbers, their own city's price-to-rent ratio, their own timeline, their own likelihood of moving in 5 years versus staying for 20. They both borrowed a belief from the culture around them, instead of building one from their own math. The real trap isn't renting and it isn't buying. It's picking a side based on what your parents did, what a headline told you, or what felt emotionally satisfying at 27, instead of running your own numbers with your own real inputs. And if you're wondering what happens when someone does both, buys a home and still invests aggressively on top of it, that's a completely different video, and the numbers there might surprise you even more than this one did. But for now, before you let anyone tell you renting is throwing money away, or that buying is always the smarter move, ask one question. Did you actually run your own numbers for your own city at today's rates? Because that's the only answer that matters.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe for more practical finance and investing content. Share this video with someone who could benefit from it, and help us spread financial knowledge. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.